Financial with Christopher Calandra, Certified Financial Planner, is an innovative, comprehensive, informative, and cutting-edge podcast that discusses financial topics ranging from personal finance, economics, politics, and personal growth. Simply Financial will cover intriguing and thought-provoking questions so that the listener can simply increase their financial IQ.
Thanks for joining me today. This is Christopher Calandra, the Simply Financial podcast. This is episode number 5 of season 4.
So on today's episode, it's the second part of a two-part series. In the first part, I interviewed Gil Cody, and now I am going to speak with her husband, Gil, and she paid him a very high compliment at the end of our interview, saying that you, Gil, were the savvier of the two when it comes to money. So I don't want to put any pressure on you. She did great in our discussion. Are you, in fact, the savvier of the two when it comes to money?
I would say yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for taking a little bit of time out to discuss personal finance with me. You and I have had several really good conversations. I appreciate your approach to dealing with money and we're going to talk about this, how you like to help others increase their financial IQ, helping them to make smart financial decisions. And I wanted to begin talking a little bit about when you were growing up, Gil, your household, your family. Did you grow up in a wealthy family? Was it poor? Was it middle class?
We always felt as if we were middle class because, one, we owned the home we lived in. 2, we always had 2 cars, 3, we got an opportunity. We went on vacations every summer. We went to the beach. I went to camp with the guys in the neighborhood. We had baseball teams and football teams. So it was a middle class African American home that I grew up in.
Very good. And was it a 2-parent home?
2-parent home. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was a blue-collar worker, worked at General Motors in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay. So he was a blue-collar factory worker for GM for most of his career?
Yes.
All right. Very good. And what did you learn about money growing up? What are some of your early memories about money and what you learned?
Well, my dad had an 8th grade education, and he had served in the Navy, and he just always exposed me to personal finance by letting me get involved in the things that he did. For instance, he got paid every week. So on Fridays, because he worked 3rd shift, he'd come in, he'd lay his check on the table, and he would make the market lists and the bills that needed to be paid, any checks that needed to be written. I think I was probably 10, 11 years old. My dad would tell me, okay, write this check out to this person. So
wow.
I was learning how to do that at a very young age. And then he would take me to the market with him. and he would show me how, what type of items he would buy. And I never thought it was odd that my dad went to the market rather than my mother, like the other mothers did in the neighborhood. But my dad took charge of the finances. And one of the things he was most proud of was the fact that he paid for his house in like 10 years. He paid that house off in 10 years.
Okay, so he bought a house, which in and of itself is an accomplishment. And then he and your mother must have been focused on paying off that mortgage, which even to this day, Gil, seems to me is the part of the American dream, is to own a home and then to own it outright and be mortgage free. And doing that in 10 years is a great accomplishment.
Absolutely.
So when did you find out the home was paid? Well, let me ask it this way first. How old were you when the house was paid off, you think?
Let me see, I was probably 16 years old, 15,
okay.
16 years old, yeah.
And at 16, were you aware that they were on a mission to pay off the mortgage? Was that something that was spoken about, or did he explain to you that this was something that they were striving to do?
Yes, my dad, again, I was the oldest of four, and he always made sure that I was involved in the processes and he explained the goals. Like he always had savings bonds coming out of his pay. That's how he saved his money, you know.
Sure.
And he told me, he says, well, I got a car for your mother. Always let your wife drive the best car, and I've got this other clunker here that I drive to work. He says, but this is the mission that we're on. We want to try to pay this house off. In fact, we got another 6 months to go, and it'll all be paid off, and we'll all go out and celebrate.
He sounds like a very wise man.
Yeah, he was. He was a great guy.
And probably didn't make an obscene amount of money being a blue-collar worker, but it sounds like he made a number of smart decisions along the way to take good care of his family. Is that a good way to describe it?
That's a very good way to describe it. Exactly.
All right. Awesome. So it sounds like at a young age, your dad did a very good job for you, and I would assume your siblings too, of teaching about money. It seems like in many households and communities in this country that kind of wisdom, that kind of teaching is in short supply, too short supply. There's not enough of that. Would you agree with that assessment?
I do agree with that.
And one of the things I had wanted to ask you about, and you had said at the outset, in thinking about the African American community, which I am not a part of, you've been with me, and we've talked about some of this stuff when we've been together, it seems to me, based on my 27 years of experience as a financial planner, that the African American community is somewhat underserved in terms of the underserved in the area of personal finance, whether it's education, resources, or what have you. And one of the things that impresses me so much about you, and Debbie too, is your willingness and interest to make sure that family and loved ones, people you come in contact with, are in a position to get educated so that they could be financially successful and kind of follow some of the principles it sounds like you learned at a very young age and have carried with you through your life. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of this to you, the importance of helping people, not just in the African American community, but even beyond that, and how you like to help people?
Well, having told you about my dad, there were many comparisons in our neighborhood. That middle class description that I gave you, there were many people that lived in my neighborhood. They felt as if they met the middle class definition as well, but their definition was how shiny and new the cars, the automobiles were.
Right.
The bling that they wore on their wrists and around their necks, many of those folks. And even though, we lived in, it's called a townhouse now, but it was they were called row houses back when I was growing up.
All right.
I think that my dad kind of set us all on a path. For instance, he paid that house off in 10 years. I owned my first house when I was 24 years old. My brother owned his first house when he was 26 years old. My sister, I think she was 28 or whenever she finished law school. And I think that's very, very important. And we've tried to tell our children the same thing by, one, giving them an allowance, two, making sure that they always worked when they were teenagers and they were eligible to work, and to show them how to do something as simple as put your change in a jar. My kids still do that,
I still do that at my house, by the way.
It's very, very important. It's a small thing, but you go down the road a few months or a year or whatever, you got $1,000 sitting in the jar, And so we try to teach our kids that, one, you need to be self-sufficient. I love you, I raised you, but I don't want you to live in my house as an adult. I want you to get your own house. I want you to save some money. I want you to make sure that you're self-sufficient and that you understand that things like having your own automobile and having a good job and education. Now, we always stress college is not for everybody, but you need to have some sort of expertise, something that allows you to accumulate wealth. Now, that may sound a little bit too sophisticated for some parents to tell their kids, but that's the way that we raise our children.
Very good. Do you have any advice for other families that might be struggling with finances and building wealth?
I think that if people are struggling, it's because, one, they don't even know how much money they make. Two, they don't have an appreciation for the bills that they have made. Three, they don't know the difference between the things that they want and the things that they actually need. And when they bring those things into perspective and bring their children and let them understand this is why we are where we are right now, this is why we can't purchase this right now. Like, I've never bought my kids a pair of $180 tennis shoes. Never. I never did that. And I explained to them, it's not that I couldn't afford them, but there's other monetary benefits that you'll get from us other than some shoes that you can walk around in and show people that you have those shoes. So my advice to other families is to address those things that I just mentioned, understand exactly where you are, what your earning capability is, what your responsibilities are, and make sure that your children understand what their status is. They ought to know whether they're poor or wealthy or whether they're middle class, and explain that to them and get them involved in the process and have a plan.
Very good. So I'm kind of going off my script a little bit because I'm fascinated about your dad. So if he had an 8th grade education and he served in the Navy, I think you said, was he drafted or was he a career guy in the Navy?
He was drafted, and the Army was the only service that drafted, but you had the option to join one of the other services when your draft number was called, or
yes,
you just enlisted. So that was his situation. He was drafted, and he chose to go in the Navy.
So where did he learn about money?
I'll tell you, my grandfather was a farmer, and so he basically ran a business. He was a very, very light-skinned man living in North Carolina. So he was allowed to participate in the farming enterprise at a level that was different from the darker-skinned African Americans in the community.
I see.
And he relayed that to us. So he was a pretty savvy businessman. So he ran that farm, and he imparted the business aspect of it to all 9 of his children. And I believe that's where my dad got that from.
So this is a multi-generational awareness of money, and not that you're, multi-billionaires or anything like that, but I'm getting the sense that this is a multi-generational family tradition about being wise with money and purposeful with money. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is, and I will tell you that all 9 of my dad's siblings own their homes.
Right.
So it's just a family thing. You're a Cody, then when are you gonna buy a house? How long have you had that house? That sort of thing is something that permeates my entire family. That you should get a job, have a career, take care of your kids, save some money, and buy a house. I mean, that's standard. It is multi-generational.
And you mentioned that your grandfather, your paternal grandfather, was a farmer in North Carolina. You grew up, though, in the Baltimore area. Is that right?
Right in Baltimore City, absolutely.
All right. So given what you learned from your grandfather and your father, which I'm, again, completely fascinated by, so what rules do you have on handling money? What are some of your rules and guidelines that you've used to a positive effect in your own life?
One of the basic tenets is